Hello again. I've been hearing a lot on virtually every platform, as I think everybody has, about the idea of defunding the police. And I want to chime in on this because I think there is a lot of misunderstanding about what the concept means. I I get the impression that a lot of people think it means something that it's not. And so I want to give my idea of what I think it means and clear up some misconceptions that I think people have about it, because it is something that is not completely unprecedented before, and definitely not in Canada. It's happened several times and with fairly positive results, and continues to happen in some areas with positive results, and that doesn't get portrayed in the narrative that I see a lot of people going with it. So the first thing I want to talk about is why it doesn't mean what I think many people think it means. And the first reason is that defunding is nowhere near the correct word to describe what people seem to actually want to happen when they talk about defunding. Not all the ideas about that involve the concept of defunding involve police departments receiving any less money. And some ideas will even involve spending more money, not necessarily on the police force, but more money on policing in general. But defunding doesn't give that impression. The better word to describe what is going on would be reforming instead of defunding, because that is what is actually being proposed. I've heard many different reformations that have been suggested through the defunding process. And yes, I will admit that there are some people in the defund the police movement that are calling for total abolition of the police. However, the vast majority of serious discussion about defunding the police does not involve abolition in any way. In fact, most of the predominant advocates that I have read about or heard from are actually not wanting a total abolition of the police department. It is actually just much needed reforms that they are looking at. And when I said that defunding wasn't all that unprecedented, let's take a look at where we have defunded the police before. And start off with game and fisheries agents, M&R and fisheries people, and other non-police security agencies. At some point, we said there are laws against this. We need to enforce this behavior, but we don't really feel as though that is the best job for the RCMP or the OPP or the local police detachment. We feel that there should be a branch that is better suited to deal with this, because these are specific laws. And we see that, like I said, not only with MNR folk, but with customs agencies and intelligence agencies and other things such as that. And as I mentioned, the multiple different police forces. Historically, our provincial police forces are a defunding of the RCMP, and our city police forces are defunding of the provincial police forces and the RCMP. So it's not, there's a perfect example of what would be called defunding actually resulting in more money being invested in policing and more of a reformation. Other areas where we have defunded the police is by giving the police the usage of more technology. We tried that with photo radar, which had varying results, but on the whole was scrapped. But that was one way to make things safer on the major busy highways. To get the cops off the road, they decided to go with cameras to catch the speeders and reduce the risk of there being any chases going through traffic. Body cameras, that's another way of defunding the police, because they can just send in body cam footage, and therefore it prevents the police from having to spend much time in courts, and it's a way of making the job more efficient. It was a reformation that also allowed the police to be accountable for their actions and to show the public that they are doing a good job, and that they are doing a good job at keeping neighborhoods secure. Another thing that people don't really look at as a defunding or a police reformation, but the fact that police have helicopters. Linking back to the reducing the risk of high-speed chases. There was an outcry about dangerous driving and high-speed chases, so they implemented helicopters so that people could be followed through the air in a safer way. Helicopters probably added to the budget of police stations, yet that would be a defunding effort, because it's a step taken to increase the safety of the general public. It's a reformation that makes the public safer and reduces the amount of police officers needed to do the same job. Another more recent example of police defunding is decriminalization of substances. We recently legalized marijuana for recreational use here in this country. That was a major defunding of the police. Now they no longer have to look for as many marijuana dealers. It's a drastic change that could have involved reduced income to the police departments, but it didn't. There was no loss of funding. The funding was just put into more specific usages because the police were no longer having to track down as many illegal marijuana operators. And the same thing happened with prohibition of alcohol. That by decriminalizing things, it is a way of defunding or reforming how the police do their job. So there is a precedent made, even within this country, to do a lot of the things that, to follow through with a lot of the concepts being discussed in the defunding argument of policing. Now, what can we do to continue defunding as I'm hearing people want? Like, what am I thinking the majority of the narrative is, and why I tend to agree with the defunding process is that they want to expand the use of case appropriate expertise. And we're seeing that in Hamilton. The Hamilton City Police, on certain types of calls, whether it's crisis calls for check-ins or certain kinds of domestic calls, they are not just bringing a police officer, but they are bringing a social worker with them on these calls, and they are allowing the social worker to take the lead on them. And they are finding that not only is there a reduction in the amount of violent incidences that are happening during these times, but they're also finding that the amount of positive resolutions are increasing, and they're finding that many of the people who are typically in crisis that they see multiple times are actually getting better than they were the old way, when it was just police officers who are only trained as police officers going in and checking in on these people. Another thing I've been hearing about is disarming the police. And there is not necessarily precedent for that in Canada, but where my mother is immigrated from, Scotland, many of their police officers don't carry guns. It's only certain units, certain divisions of the police departments that carry guns. It's not deemed necessary for many of the police to carry guns because they feel that having armed people go into certain situations is only going to escalate the situation further. And they train their police officers to de-escalate situations in non-violent ways, so they don't have to have guns on them. Yet, if there's a situation that calls for guns, they do have the divisions there ready to come in with guns if that is what is needed. And that goes along with the next point, with increased training level of police officers. What I would personally like to see happen is that policing become a course where there is a prerequisite for some sort of social studies or mental health studies to be taken and graduated before you can even enter a policing program. I think that we need to get our police officers fully understanding how people in crisis work, and get them fully understanding many of the mental health issues that they are going to be seeing out on the street, including addiction, and have them know all of that before even looking how that applies at the law, and give them the ability to de-escalate situations and give them the proper techniques to be able to counsel people who are in crisis before we give them a gun. And that is what I would like to see happening. But I have also heard different ways of increasing the training level of police officers, whether it's add on an extra year of training to the program or make more mandatory training sessions and that. But either way, increasing the level of training for police is a very common theme in the discussion. And one thing that I would like to see be put into the discussion that I haven't heard is increasing the amount of personal leave and vacation time that we give for officers. Because even with all the talk of defunding, we do still need to understand that our police officers deal with high stress situations all the time. And so do our social workers, so do men. I'm not saying that to discredit other fields. I myself have worked in correctional facilities. I've worked in group homes with mentally unstable people. I've worked with former convicts. I've gone into youth jails, adult jails, and worked with kids and adults in there. And I'm currently a PSW and the son of a parent who has neurodegenerative disease, so I am quite familiar with high stress environments. I'm quite familiar with the stress that can happen on a person when you're basically getting physically attacked at least twice a week on the job, sometimes with weapons, sometimes with people that are in a psychotic episode and much bigger than you are. And because of the level of training I had in that, I was able to get out of every single one of those situations, whether it be dealing with 80-year-olds, adolescents, or full-sized adults. I managed to do it without getting seriously injured and without murdering anybody in a restraint, and never had a weapon on me once. It was all through communication and training. And I believe that every police officer should somehow get that training. But whether they have that training or not, if you're getting physically abused weekly or daily on the job, if you're getting verbally abused weekly or daily on the job, if you are suffering abuse of any type on a regular basis as a result of your job, whether it be as a police officer, as a social worker, as a PSW, as whatever, there needs to be something in place to have increased personal leave or increased vacation time for people in those high stress environments, particularly police officers. Because I have a hard time lasting almost an entire year between vacations. I don't want someone, I no longer get attacked every week on the job. I am in a more comfortable position and I deal with friendlier people. But I wouldn't want to have to get abused on a regular basis on the job and have all the mental problems that can give somebody and get all wound up like that with a gun and having to deal with more stressful situations. We gotta give our police officers more wind down time, especially if they've gone through something particularly traumatic. I don't know exactly what their leave is, but I know that giving them more before they do something bad, because we see a lot of cases where they do something that causes someone a great deal of trauma and then they get an unpaid leave, or then they get paid leave, or they get a leave that way, or they get transferred after a brief leave. We need to start giving them enough leave time and enough access to whatever therapy they might need if they do need therapy. We have to give them enough access to the time and also the professional help that they need so they don't get to the point where they're being forced into leave because the stress of the job got to them and they did something that they will regret for the rest of their lives. We have to look after them that way. And that can be part of the defunding process, is making sure our police officers stay mentally fit to do the job, and to do that, we have to look after them. Because it has got to be disheartening for all first responders, and whether it be social workers, paramedics, police officers, or the military, to put their, in many cases, their lives on the line to benefit the country. and to benefit families all around this great country, and then need to be able to get time off or get the help they need to be able to deal with their issues so they can continue to do that job and not be able to get it, and then go down that spiral. And that is one area that we can help our officers out through a defunding or reforming process. And I'm hoping that can clear up a little bit about it. I know I interjected some of my personal thoughts into it, but to be clear, it's not, the general narrative is not about eliminating our police forces altogether. It's to continue to do what we have historically done in this country, and that is look at the way things are being policed, realizing that there might be a better way to do that, whether that means transferring responsibilities to another set of people, whether that means transferring more funding from one branch of our policing and security area to another branch of security area, or whether that means just creating another branch of policing altogether. We have a history of recognizing that changes needed to be made, and by making them. And we can continue to do that, but we need to be on the same page altogether moving forward to do that. And I'm hoping that by describing how the term defunding is a little misleading when it comes to what the actual narrative is of the concept, that it will be able to at least open people's minds a little bit and listen to the discussion after just clicking off as soon as they hear the term defunding. Because I notice that is what many people do. They hear that defunding word and just tune it right off. So I'm hoping this will help people at least stay in tune with the conversation after that term gets used. Thank you.